From that day, Japan's relationship with baseball transformed. No longer the student, it had become the rival, the disciplined warrior facing the brash king. Schools built stronger programs. Companies began sponsoring teams, blurring the line between amateur and professional play. Players trained like soldiers, rising before dawn to run drills until their lungs burned. Coaches preached humility, perseverance, and relentless repetition. There is no perfection, they said, only the pursuit of it. And every player believed it. As the 1930s rolled in, baseball stadiums turned into temples of national pride. The uniforms gleamed white under the sun. The stands shook with chants. And somewhere, deep in that noise, the soul of Japan found its rhythm. A heartbeat in sync with the game itself. Baseball had become more than a sport. It was a reflection of the Japanese way of life. Kaizen, continuous improvement, endless dedication, and the quiet courage to begin again after every strikeout. The Americans had given Japan a pastime, but Japan had turned it into a philosophy, a mirror of discipline, teamwork, and beauty. Every throw, every slide, every bowed head before the umpire was a declaration of national identity. By the eve of World War II, baseball wasn't foreign anymore. It was homegrown, sacred, and unstoppable. The boys who once learned from American teachers now played with the calm fire of samurai. Loyal to the game, loyal to the craft, loyal to the spirit of never giving up. And as the world darkened, as global tension began to rise, Japan's love for baseball burned brighter. Because for millions, that diamond field wasn't just a place to play. It was the only place left where hope still felt pure. Where every swing still meant something. Not just to win, but to prove that Japan's heart could endure anything. But every rise casts a shadow. And Japan's love affair with baseball was about to face its darkest test. The 1930s had ended with thunder in the distance, the drums of war growing louder each year. Stadium cheers began to fade beneath the sound of marching boots. The same boys who once stood on the pitcher's mound were now standing in military lines. Heads shaved, uniforms changed, bats turned into rifles. Baseball gloves gathered dust. What was once a game of honor became a symbol of foreign influence. And in a nation now preparing for total war, foreign influence was the enemy. By 1943, the sport that once united a generation was nearly outlawed. The government declared that luxury sports distracted from the empire's duty. English words like strike, safe, and home run were banned. Teams were forced to rename themselves in Japanese. The beloved Yomiuri Giants became the Tokyo Kyojin. American-style uniforms were replaced by plain, military-styled ones. Even the baseballs themselves were made from poor, wartime leather. Brittle, misshapen, barely usable. But Japan was at war not only with nations abroad. It was at war with its own heart. Some players resisted in silence. They played in secret, hidden fields under the moonlight, whispering the old words, practicing the old swings. For them, baseball wasn't rebellion. It was remembrance, a fragile reminder of the world they had before. But when the war reached its peak, even those whispers faded. Many of Japan's greatest players were drafted into battle. Among them was Eiji Sawamura, the young legend who once struck out Babe Ruth. He went to war with the same discipline he once showed on the mound. Steady, brave, and loyal. But on December 2nd, 1944, his ship was torpedoed in the Philippine Sea. Sawamura was gone at just 27. The boy who once made Japan believe it could conquer baseball had become one more name on the empire's list of fallen heroes. By the end of the war, baseball was all but dead. The stadiums were rubble. The fields were silent. The sound of children laughing, the chants of fans, the crack of the bat, all replaced by the hum of air raid sirens and the weight of defeat. When the bombs fell on Tokyo, Osaka, and Hiroshima, the fields that once represented joy became graves of memory. For a time, it seemed that Japan's spirit, and the game that defined it, had been buried beneath the ashes. Then came August 1945. The war ended, the empire fell, and Japan stood in ruins, burned cities, empty homes, hungry families, and a silence heavier than any loss before. In those days, baseball seemed meaningless. What could a game offer to a nation that had lost everything? But deep down, in the hearts of millions, something still flickered. A memory, a rhythm, the echo of that wooden bat striking leather, the simple beauty of teamwork, the dream of normalcy. When the American occupation began under General Douglas MacArthur, something unexpected happened. Alongside food, medicine, and rebuilding plans, the Americans brought baseballs, bats, and gloves. Soldiers played with Japanese children in the streets. Games were organized between American units and local teams. For the first time in years, laughter returned to Japan's fields. Baseball, once banned as an enemy's sport, became the bridge between conqueror and conquered, a language that needed no translation. Those who survived the war came back changed. Their swings were slower, their bodies scarred, their eyes older. But when they stepped onto those rough, improvised diamonds again, it felt like stepping into sunlight after years of darkness. The crowds were small at first, just families, children, and elders watching quietly from the edges. But every cheer that rose was an act of healing. Every inning played was a reminder that Japan still had something left to live for. And in that fragile peace, a nation began to rebuild. Not just its cities, but its soul. Baseball, once used as propaganda, returned to its true form. A game of honor, discipline, and hope. It taught people how to stand again, how to work together, how to believe in something beyond survival. In those years after the war, Japan didn't just rediscover baseball, it needed it. The field became a sanctuary, the one place where defeat could transform into renewal, where the next generation could find strength not in weapons, but in teamwork. The same game that had nearly vanished in the flames was now breathing life back into a broken country. And though Japan had fallen, baseball would help it rise again. One pitch, one swing, one quiet prayer at a time. The war had ended, but Japan's wounds ran deep. Cities were flattened, food was scarce, and hope was fragile. A ghost haunting the ruins. Yet amid the rubble and silence, something began to stir again. Baseball. That old, familiar rhythm returned. The soft thud of a glove, the clean crack of a bat, the laughter of children chasing fly balls through the dust. It began quietly, on empty lots where houses once stood, with bats carved from scrap wood and balls wrapped in tape. There were no uniforms, no stadiums, no trophies. Just the pure, simple act of playing. And for Japan, that was enough. The American occupation didn't just rebuild roads and factories. It reignited the spirit of competition. U.S. soldiers played games with local kids, and soon, the stands filled again with civilians eager to feel alive. For a people who had lost nearly everything, baseball was the one thing that felt familiar, the one thread of continuity between the Japan that was and the Japan that could be. And when the Yomiuri Giants were reformed in 1946, the country finally had a team to believe in again. Their games became more than entertainment. They became proof that Japan could stand, rebuild, and hope. In 1949, the Nippon Professional Baseball League was officially born. 12 teams, new rivalries, and a dream that would carry Japan into a golden age. The league wasn't just about competition. It was about redemption. Each player carried the weight of a nation's humiliation on his back, and every victory was a declaration that Japan was not defeated in spirit. The stadiums, rebuilt from ashes, filled again with chants and banners. Vendors sold rice balls instead of peanuts. Fans bowed before the anthem. It was baseball, yes, but it was also rebirth. Then came the era of Shigeo Nagashima and Sadaharu Oh, two names that would define not just a team, but an entire generation. Nagashima, the graceful third baseman with movie star charisma, and Oh, the quiet, disciplined hitter of mixed Japanese and Chinese heritage, were opposites in style, but brothers in purpose. Together, they turned the Yomiuri Giants into legends. From the late 1950s through the 1970s, they dominated the league. 11 Japan Series championships in 13 years. The country worshipped them like deities of discipline and perfection. Every time Oh stepped to the plate, the crowd fell silent as if preparing for prayer. His swing was poetry, slow, deliberate, and devastating. He would go on to hit 868 home runs, a world record that even the mighty Babe Ruth could not match. But what made Japan's redemption so powerful wasn't just the victories. It was the way they won. Their baseball wasn't about brute strength or flashy power. It was about precision, sacrifice bunts, patience, and harmony. The Japanese style of play, wano yakyu, baseball of harmony, reflected everything the country had become. Humble, efficient, unyielding. Practice sessions ran for hours, drills repeated until muscle memory became meditation. Players bowed before stepping onto the field, bowed before the umpire, bowed after every game, win or lose. To play baseball in Japan was to embody discipline itself. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the Americans watched with fascination. The game they had exported was coming back refined, polished, spiritual. In 1959, when the San Francisco Giants came to Japan for a goodwill tour, they were stunned by the level of devotion they saw. The stadiums were immaculate. The fans bowed. The players executed plays with surgical precision. They play baseball like they live life, one American reporter wrote, with beauty in every detail. And while Japan's domestic game flourished, the country's pride soared even higher when it began to face international opponents. In 1964, the same year Tokyo hosted the Olympics, Japan's baseball success became a symbol of rebirth. The world saw a nation no longer defined by war, but by willpower. The diamond had replaced the battlefield, the bat had replaced the sword, and the sound of a ball meeting a glove had become the rhythm of peace. By the 1970s, Japanese baseball had become a mirror of the country's economic miracle. As factories grew and skyscrapers rose, the discipline that drove Japan's post-war recovery was reflected in every game. The players trained longer than anyone. They respected their coaches like generals. They worked in silence, with a fire that burned deep but never shouted. And every time the Yomiuri Giants won another title, the crowd didn't just cheer for a team. They cheered for a nation that had learned to rise again without anger, to fight without hatred, and to win with grace. Through baseball, Japan had healed. The game that once symbolized foreign influence had become its own art form. Delicate, disciplined, eternal. Children who grew up watching Owen Nagashima would carry that legacy into schools, companies, and everyday life. Baseball had taught them something priceless. That perfection isn't a destination, it's a devotion. That even after the greatest loss, you can rebuild, pitch by pitch, swing by swing. And so, the new Japan was born not in the smoke of war, but in the sunlight of baseball diamonds. A nation reborn through rhythm, respect, and relentless pursuit of mastery. The world had watched Japan fall, but now it was watching Japan rise higher than ever. Not as an empire of might, but as a culture of grace. The stadium is quiet now. The cheers have faded, but the echoes remain. In every glove snapped shut on a dusty field, in every child who bows before stepping into the batter's box. Japan didn't just master baseball, it transformed it. What began as an imported pastime became a mirror of the nation's soul, a reflection of its patience, its discipline, its relentless spirit to perfect what others thought was already perfect. Those early years of imitation became decades of innovation, of small schools producing giants of precision, of pitchers who studied wind and breath as much as mechanics, of hitters who could turn a single bunt into poetry. The sport became a ritual, an art form where failure wasn't shameful. It was sacred, because it meant you cared enough to try again. And when Japan began defeating the same Americans who had once taught them the game, it wasn't revenge. It was gratitude. Gratitude for a gift they'd taken, honored, and elevated. Today, whether it's a high school ace wiping tears after Koshin or Shohei Ohtani staring down the best in the world, the story remains the same. Effort over talent, grace over pride, heart over noise. Baseball in Japan isn't just played. It's lived, in silence, in reverence, in the shared heartbeat between pitcher and crowd. Because in the end, baseball isn't just a sport that Japan fell in love with. It's a promise that even in failure there is beauty, that even in repetition there is art, that even when the crowd stops cheering, the soul of the game keeps whispering, "Ganbate," try harder. And that's why, for Japan, baseball will never just be a game, it will always be a way of life. In every swing, Japan didn't just chase victory, it chased perfection. And somewhere between the crack of the bat and the silence after the pitch, it found its soul.